Welcome to A Mason's Work, the podcast where we review Masonic symbols and illustrate how they can be used to solve problems in everyday life. With your host, Brian Mattox, a proud member of the Craftsman Online Media Network.
So in our recent episodes, we talked about openness and creating space. We talked about silence and using that as a positive response to trauma and turmoil and the stuff going on around you. In today's episode, I want to talk about vulnerability. You'll probably have heard people say that we should be more vulnerable, or you should be more vulnerable, or I feel vulnerable. But we don't really kind of surface what that really means for a lot of people. And so I want to kind of give you a little bit of a roadmap of what vulnerability is, maybe talk about some of the reasons why you should consider exploring that in your everyday life. So vulnerability is, it is a feeling that you have. It's an emotional response or an emotional sort of interplay between risking your social reputation in some way or another, with some exposure of some sort of truth that you would prefer to keep hidden because you're concerned about the social repercussions, right? It's not just like coming clean or confessional. You can be vulnerable in a lot of ways. You can be vulnerable talking about a pain you've experienced. You can be vulnerable talking about the things that you're afraid of in general or in specific. So when we talk about vulnerability, we're really talking about kind of an emotional openness that comes in response to the fear of some sort of rejection. When we're being vulnerable, the most vulnerable, we are oftentimes expressing perhaps very, very strong emotions or very, very strong, exposing very strong historical events that you've had a response to. And that process of sort of divesting yourself of it in some way and putting yourself out there with someone else in the room or in the conversation, or even you can be vulnerable in situations like hosting a podcast. When you have that kind of exposure, there's a lot of things that kind of happen. But as you're vulnerable, sort of vulnerable content that comes from a vulnerable place, songs that you write from a vulnerable place, interactions you have from a vulnerable place, tend to be deeper, stronger, and more fulfilling, particularly when rejection isn't the response. So what are the barriers that we might have to being vulnerable? Some of us are just very, very fearful of the social response. So you are, you have experienced something that had a strong potential social negative connotation. Or you've had some sort of past event, I hesitate to say trauma, but some sort of past event that you are uncomfortable sharing. And you're worried that you're going to be rejected for it. You might also be reluctant to be vulnerable because you are afraid to invite people into that part of your life. You don't necessarily want other people to talk to you about these places where you feel a ton of emotional response. Whatever the case may be, there's tons of reasons why you might be worried about being vulnerable or concerned about what that outcome might create. But I want to be quite clear. The more vulnerable you can become, the more vulnerable you can be, again, without necessarily, this isn't a virtue signaling situation. This isn't a kind of you're not pretending to be vulnerable. You don't want to use it to manipulate people, for example. But the more vulnerable you can be, the deeper connections you can make. And the stronger the connections with your network, the more likely you are to be able to explore the parts of you that may be holding you back, which is awesome and super helpful. You build a strong resilience to the overall kind of sort of upcoming adversities that you may experience in life. That resilience comes from people in your network hearing you vulnerably express yourself and not rejecting you. So there's just a ton of positive sort of business case benefits for this. You also will find that by letting go and allowing other people to kind of help carry the burden for a little while, first off, the burden for them will not be as emotionally taxing, most likely. And for you, the relief you're going to get through this kind of unburdening or collective vulnerability will be profound. It's like opening a whole new area that it's like when you have a cold or something and you're congested, it's like that first day where you can breathe clearly again. So as you experience the opportunities in your life to be vulnerable, I would encourage you to lean into the vulnerability as opposed to lean away from it. You will not, very likely you will not have negative reactions from oversharing or from being vulnerable as much as you'll have the strong responses from the unburdening of some of these ideas and thoughts, or some of the kind of airing out of the experiences, the emotional content that you have. So consider vulnerability in your path forward and do your best to cultivate it. And I think you'll find positive outcomes and responses head your way.
The views represented in this podcast are those of the speaker alone and are not representative of any grand or subordinate lodge.
Hi, Brian here. I wanted to thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you have any suggestions or guidance for further episodes you'd like to see or hear, whatever the case may be, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at amasonswork.com, and we will try and incorporate your suggestions into a future recording. Thanks.
Freemasonry teaches us that the true work is within, a lifelong journey of reflection, discipline, and discovery. At A Mason's Work, we help Masons bring out their best selves through meaningful self-inquiry and symbolic practice. From personal reflection to lodge engagement, we offer tools that turn symbols into action. Visit us at amasonswork.com. The work is within. The time is now.